Back in early August, I wrote in my journal the following: a tidal wave of fatigue is coming for leaders and lay people. Now, when I wrote that, I didn't write it because I had tapped into some secret prophetic gift I have, because I don't have that gift. Um, and I hadn't consulted a crystal ball or even a magic 8 ball. What had happened was this. My suspicions were confirmed by a guy named Jimmy Dodd. Jimmy heads up an organization that helps step in and clean up the aftermath in a church when either a church goes through a major meltdown or a pastor has a major meltdown of his own. And Jimmy noted that research has shown that 6 months after any massive disaster, an earthquake, a hurricane, terrorist attack, a financial meltdown, whatever, 6 months after the disaster, there's a significant increase in leader resignations and in depression, flame outs, and worse scenarios. It kind of goes like this. When the crisis hits, leaders provide some clarity and they help focus our energies and our efforts. But as the months go on, leading becomes more difficult. The unity among those that were trying to lead fades, the adrenaline quits pumping as much, and tiredness just plain gives way to fatigue. And by the time you get to 6 months after the initial disaster, something has to give. And so for many leaders, they just choose to resign. They say, hey, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't what I got into this for. And so they just resign. Others self-medicate. They try to find a way to ease the pain or distract themselves or look for something that'll make them feel again because they're so numb, but that will cost them nothing relationally. Some succumb to the hopelessness and commit suicide. As you know, our world entered a massive crisis, the COVID pandemic, back in March, and here in the USA, we arrived at the 6 month mark in mid-September, and unfortunately, all those statistics from previous crises are playing out exactly as predicted. We're seeing at this point in time record numbers of resignations among leaders, including church leaders and pastors, and we're seeing other flame outs and those worst scenarios taking place as well. It's now October, and this week I read an article by Carey Nieuwhof called "Can a Culture Burn Out?" And I want to read to you just a segment of that article. He wrote this: given that a nation is the sum of its people, it's good to look within to yourself and around to others. And when certain behaviors and characteristics are widespread enough to characterize a people, you could argue that the culture is burning out. So what do you look for? While this is not a medical diagnosis, see if any of this sounds familiar. Cynicism, a loss of passion, and a pervasive numbness often signify burnout. To say we've grown cynical and grown numb as a culture is a bit of an understatement right now, and cynicism never finds a home in a healthy heart. In addition to numbness, though, burnout can bring about disproportionate emotional responses like anger over things that shouldn't normally make you angry. The weird combination of numbness to many things and livid anger about many other things is a classic sign of burnout. On that note, that's exactly what your social media feed is right now, a strange combination of indifference and fury. Other symptoms include loss of motivation, like, this will never get better, so what's the point? And the inability to think straight. When I burned out, it was as though my mind stopped working. I couldn't form many logical thoughts. Taking a look at our culture right now, and it's easy to see we're not making great decisions, and the decisions we are making are often fueled by impulse, emotion, and anger. A final sign worth noting is that people who are burning out often self-medicate. That usually takes the form of addiction. The addiction can be something as virtuous as work or food. For me, it was both of those things. I worked far too many hours and ate some of my feelings, which of course makes you feel worse. Other times you can get addicted to spending, gaming, binge watching, exercise, or anything else that helps you numb out or escape. And of course, people self-medicate through the use of alcohol, drugs, sex, and gambling. The fact that we are a deeply addicted culture points to an inability to cope with the current reality, which opens the door wide for healing and ministry. Yeah, that's the good news. The good news is there's a huge open door for us for ministering to people, because we are living in a culture that is showing the signs of burnout, led by leaders who, if the statistics hold true, are going to resign in record numbers or do worse things. That has me concerned for our community. It has me concerned for our church members. I'm concerned for many segments of the population. I'm concerned for millennials, for business owners, for leaders, for extroverts, for nursing home residents, and for kids. I'm especially concerned for parents because they're experiencing this both as citizens who are living in a culture showing the signs of burnout and all that goes with that, but they're also leaders. They're trying to lead their home and lead their family through this mess. And so what I want to do over these next few weeks is just give us a parenting mini-series. Now, I know we're not all parents. And so I've tried to write this in a way that there are nuggets for everyone. And so, please stay with me, engage as I try to give us this information and find the nuggets that are there for you. For kids, please hear. I know you're not parents, right? You're kids. But it was my concern for you that drove me to write this series, because I thought that the best thing I personally can probably do for you is help influence the people who are, in many ways, shaping your future, but also spending so much of the day-to-day with you. For parents, please know that I am concerned for your well-being. And one of my big goals in this series is to relieve some pressure on you as parents. We're living in a challenging time, and I want to see if I can give you a little bit of help with that. So let's just jump in. Did you know that parenting isn't for experts? It's not. God ordained it that parenting be done by amateurs. Think about who it is that God gives kids to. God gives children to young adults. It's as if he looks and says, okay, you're in your 20s. You're still trying to figure out how things work and what your identity is going to be and all that. Here's a kid for you to shape and care for and train and raise. And so you get this kid and you do your best, right? But you're an amateur. And so you make rookie mistakes. But you do the best you can, and then you have a kid, and then, maybe you have a second kid, and maybe you apply some of the things you learned on the first kid, but find out that each kid is different. And so, okay, some of the stuff that you finally figured out worked on the first kid don't work on the second kid. And then maybe you have a third kid, and maybe by the third kid, you feel like, all right, I'm starting to get some experience here. They're teens, and I'm seeing how this works. And, we got 3 kids. One turned out right, and I think I know what went wrong with the other 2. So maybe a fourth one I could do really well with. And then boom, what happens? About the age you've accumulated parenting experience, God takes away your ability to bear children. You're past those years, those childbearing years. And your experience isn't able to be put to use in that setting anymore. So now, why do I tell you that, that God ordained it for parenting to be done by amateurs? Well, because there's this pressure that a lot of us parents feel, and that is the pressure that, we somehow got to be perfect. We've got to get it right. We've got to get it right all the time. We've got to do the right things. We've got to not do any of the wrong things. And we got to do all the right things in the right amounts with the right consistency. We've got to be perfect. And I'm not sure who feels this pressure more, whether it's parents who have kids at home or parents who have an adult child who's making some poor choices, and they're looking back and they're reflecting on their parenthood and they're thinking, I didn't do it right and this is all my fault. And, oh, man, you know what? There are a lot of factors at play in that scenario. And I want you to know that, there's more at work there than all the choices you made and the failures you had. And I want you to cut yourself a little bit of slack and maybe give yourself a little bit of grace, because God ordained it that parenting be done by amateurs. And second, God gives us an amazing amount of freedom in choosing our parenting style and the methods that we're going to use as parents. It really hit me as I was preparing for this series that, there are not a lot of parenting scripture texts. There are not a ton of parenting commands in the Bible. God speaks about many other things more than parenting. There are a few instructions for sure. We're going to look at some. There are several proverbs. There are many negative examples in the Bible, right? You could probably make a good list of them. There are lots of negative examples. Sometimes I wonder if there are more negative examples than positive examples of parenting in the Bible. And most of the texts that we have in the Bible that speak to parents speak more about our need to be intentional, or they warn us about pitfalls to avoid rather than teaching us, hey, here's a specific style that you need to have as a parent, or here's a list of required parenting actions. All parents must do the following. We don't find those kinds of passages. Let me just give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about. We had the warning in Proverbs that, boy, if you and I as parents, if we neglect appropriate discipline, you're going to harm your kid and you'll eventually be disgraced yourself, right? Proverbs 13:24. The one who will not use the rod hates his son. The rod here in this case means discipline your child appropriately. The one who will not use the rod hates his son, but the one who loves him disciplines him diligently. Proverbs 29:15. A rod of correction imparts wisdom, but a youth left to himself is a disgrace to his mother. And Proverbs 19:18, discipline your son while there's hope. Don't set your heart on being the cause of his death. If you neglect disciplining your child, you're going to set them up for a disastrous life. Here's another example of a warning against a pitfall. This one's written to dads in Colossians 3:21. It says, fathers, don't exasperate your children or they'll become discouraged. In other words, dads, as you're trying to teach your kids what to do and what not to do and the things that they ought to incorporate into their lives, don't do it in such a way that your child comes to the impression and the conclusion that no matter what, you just can't be happy with them. You'll never be pleased with them. Because if you do that, they'll be discouraged and they'll give up. Now, there are a few other texts, and we'll look at some more in these next couple of weeks, but I want you to hear God gives us a lot of freedom in choosing our parenting style and in our methods. And I tell you that because, again, there's a lot of pressure that we feel. And it's that feeling we get, that pressure that, we've got to be like someone else, some other parent. Perhaps we've gotten some advice from someone, or we've read their blog or their book, or we watched their video, and they have linked their success as a parent to some specific actions that they took. And so we see that and we're like, okay, I got to do that. And then maybe we see somebody else's article or some other blog and they've linked their success with some other action. We're like, oh, I got to do that too. And so we've got this pressure that we're feeling like, okay, I've got to parent just like this guy did, and just like this mom did, and just like this couple did. Or perhaps the pressure comes, feeling like we got to parent like someone else, not from advice that we're getting or observations, but more from the comparison trap. Maybe we look at them and we look at how their kids are turning out, or how far down the road they are. Maybe their kids are getting ahead in some way. Maybe they're developing more rapidly than ours, and we're caught in that comparison trap. We're comparing them with us, and we're like, and we're coming up really short, and we just feel this huge pressure, like, I got to do it like them, because we're comparing ourselves with them. Relax. Maybe that's a pressure God doesn't intend for us to feel in the midst, especially in the midst of this season when we are trying to do parenting, right, in a tidal wave of fatigue and burnout. So if we don't have to if we don't have to be an expert in order to parent well, and we don't have to all do it the same way in order to parent well, what do we need in order to parent well during a season of fatigue? I mean, what will help us? What will take the pressure off from us and at the same time help us gain ground as parents? Well, I think the answer is pretty simple: a spare child, right? I saw this cartoon this week. The dad's like, and this is our spare son, and in case the first one doesn't live up to expectations. I'm just kidding. We shouldn't have a spare child, and we won't get one. But it's an interesting thought. What will help us parent well during this season of fatigue and burnout that we're seeing so prevalent around us? In short, one of the big answers to that question, I think, is intentionality and clarity. Intentionality and clarity. See, again, back to the pressures that we feel. When we don't have clarity, that creates an additional pressure on us, because we live in an age when there are nearly unlimited options. There's so many different things we can do. We can apply this tool or this method. We can take our kids to these places. We can get them involved in these activities. There are so many options out there, nearly an unlimited number of them. And we can feel the pressure because we don't have a great way to choose among all those. And we also feel the pressure, I think, because we have, by default, conflicting priorities. Every one of us has a a parenting North Star. That Andy Stanley said that, right? Every parent is parenting toward a specific North Star. There's something that is guiding our overall parenting. There's something that we're parenting for or toward. This is the goal. This is what it is we're trying to do as parents. But many times we don't clarify that or choose that carefully. And so that creates some conflicting priorities for us. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. I think another way in which we feel the pressure when we don't have intentionality or clarity is, we mistakenly define intentionality as doing every important action or activity that we could do as parents rather than choosing one or two and doing those. And so let's just kind of talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about clarity. What is it that I'm parenting for? What am I parenting toward? What is my parenting North Star? Is it my reputation? I got to tell you, I did that at times. And many of my worst parenting stories, my worst episodes in parenting so far have been because I was far more concerned about what my kids' actions were doing to my reputation than what my kids' actions were doing to their future or to their character. But a lot of us as parents, that's a huge pull for us. We parent towards our reputation. For some, we parent towards our ego. For many, we're parenting towards this idealized education we want our kids to have, perhaps just because we want them to have that education, or perhaps we think that education is the key to their financial success. And so for us, really, financial success is the North Star. Maybe it's happiness. That's what I really want. I just want my kid to be happy. And so that's my parenting North Star. Maybe it's a well-rounded kid who got that way through an abundance of experiences. So we had him try this, and we had to try that, and we had him in this thing, and exposed to that, and go here, go there. And all these activities because we want them to be rich in experiences. For some of us, our parenting North Star is not a goal, but it's actually a non-goal. Like we just don't want to do it like our parents raised us, so we say things like, I don't know, but I'm not going to raise my kids like my dad raised me, For others, maybe it's a relationship. We want them to have relationships with their siblings and with us such that when they arrive at adulthood and they're no longer required to be with us, they still want to be with us. This I know, getting clarity about our parenting North Star will relieve pressure. And it does in a number of ways. One of the ways that it relieves pressure is it helps us answer a bunch of other questions, like what things are we going to put into our schedule? And what values and rules are we going to enforce in our house? And what are we going to focus on during this season? And not only that, it helps us not feel guilty about all the things that we have to say no to in order to say yes to whatever it is that we really are parenting toward. I wish I could tell you that I did this in our house because I was smart or I had thought it all through. But, a lot of the success that I had personally in this issue of having a parenting North Star, I kind of got backed into it. Some of you know that when Jonathan was younger, he needed special education. And so I remember really well preparing for that first meeting with all those specialists. Mar and I were getting ready to go meet with the committee on special education. John was a preschooler at the time, and there were going to be like 8 to 10 different specialists there in the room. And I remember as I was going into that meeting and really needing to be prepared for that, God impressed a couple things on me. One is he impressed on me, Andy, you can get help from these people, but you cannot delegate to them your parenting responsibility. It is your job to raise Jonathan, not theirs, but you can get help from them. And then secondly, and if you want to get help from them, it'd be really helpful to them if you knew what kind of help you were looking for and what kind of help was going to be most beneficial, most prioritized, most valuable to you. And so as Mar and I were preparing for that meeting, I remember writing it out, and we put on a paper, which when we walked in the meeting, we gave each one of them a sheet of paper with these things listed out on it. We said to them, listen, I can't delegate my parenting responsibility to you, and I am looking for help. Here's the help that's most valuable to me. Most valuable, highest concern for us is Jonathan's character development. We want him to be the kind of person who does the right kinds of things. Number 2 is his social development. We want helping him be able to relate well to other people and know how to relate to people. So we need help in that. Number 3 is his academic development, helping him learn how to talk, eventually, Lord willing, learn how to read and write and those other key academic skills. And number 4 is overcoming his autistic tendencies and maybe some of those habits to go with that. I got to tell you, preparing for that meeting and having that written out helped them a lot. It was amazing to be at that meeting and people were saying, well, I can help you with this and we could help you with that. That was awesome. But it helped me even more. It helped me in so many ways. It helped me to focus on what it was we agreed was most important, because here's what happened. I'm sort of ashamed to admit this, but by default, there were a lot of times when I was more motivated at first to focus on the aspects of John's situation that were most annoying to me, most irritating to me, perhaps slightly embarrassing to me, things like that. And having this written out like this, having a very clear North Star as a parent, helped me, I see that and recognize that hey, I said I was going to value this and this was what was going to be most important, but instead right now in my parenting, I'm tempted to push for something else. So it helped me focus on what we'd agreed was most important. It helped let go of some false guilt in other areas. There were times when we weren't able to accomplish all the things we wanted to accomplish. But we got a sense of, satisfaction as parents because we knew that we were working on the things that were most important. And it taught me to try to help my kids learn and develop one skill at a time. There were times when, you've decided as parents, like this is where we're aiming and this is the one skill or the one commitment or the one habit we're either trying to build or break right now. And then in the process of doing that over the next several days, you see several other behaviors that you're just convinced the parent that's got to go, right? It's either me or the kid and, that, or at least that kid's behavior right now, and that's got to go. And what this clear parenting North Star did for us was it gave me the courage to, when that happened, and I have like 4 or 5 other behaviors I think I need to work on, to just write them down. And say, all right, we're going to get to that. But right now, for this month or 2 months span of time, we're working on this one thing that we've agreed on. And we'll get to the next thing after this thing. We're going to do one thing at a time. And that helps so much, having that clarity and that intentionality. So to parent well in a season of fatigue and burnout, we need to relieve the pressure. And one of the ways to do that is with intentionality and clarity. I want you to hear the clarity and intentionality in these scriptures that talk to parents. The first one is Deuteronomy chapter 6. Moses wrote, "This is the command, the statutes and ordinances the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, so that you may follow them in the land you're about to enter and possess. Do this so that you may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life by keeping his statutes and commands I'm giving you, your son and your grandson, so that you may live a long life. Listen, Israel, and be careful to follow them, so that you may prosper and multiply greatly, because the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you a land flowing with milk and honey. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road and when you lie down, when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your city gates." Did you catch the intentionality there? I'm going to be very intentional about making sure that I remember and making sure that I pass on to my kids what I know about God and his expectations and how he wants us to live. Here's another passage. It's not written to parents, and it's not specifically about parents, but it's a great passage in the New Testament that really provides a North Star for us as parents. Matthew chapter 28, the 11 disciples traveled to Galilee to the mountain where Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped, but some doubted. And Jesus came near and said to them, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you. And remember, I'm with you always to the end of the age. You catch that intentionality that we're all supposed to live with, right? We are supposed to be intentional about making disciples and baptizing them and teaching them. But one incredible way to do it is a way that Jesus did it. He actually lived with a set of disciples and taught them in that way. Parents get to do that too. Hopefully you don't have 12 kids like Jesus had, right? But right, you live with your kids and you can make disciples of them and teach them what you know about God and teach them to obey. But I love how that passage ends too. Jesus said, hey, when you're doing disciple making, remember that I am with you in this. I'm with you to the end of the age. And we as parents, man, we hang on to that, right? We are not parenting alone. These are God's kids, and they are his disciples that we are making. And he is with us to the very end as we try to parent. Listen to the intentionality here in Ephesians 6:4. It says, fathers, don't stir up your anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So to parent well in a season of fatigue and burnout, we'll need intentionality. We'll need clarity. We need to keep that target that we've chosen clearly in our sight. And we need to keep the important from being crowded out by the urgent. Please hear me. We don't have to do everything that's important, but we want to make sure that we're doing something that's important. We don't want the urgent, the stuff of life, the pressures that we're facing to be all that's driving us. We don't want those things to crowd out everything that is important. So let me see if I can begin to bring this to a close. Number one, we are living, as I said already, we are living either at the beginning or perhaps just as the tidal wave of fatigue and burnout is starting to crash. We're living in a culture where many people are showing signs of burnout, and there's tremendous fatigue among our leaders. So if you're feeling fatigue, breathe, relax, and perhaps give yourself a bit of grace. It's not to be unexpected. These are the times that God is allowing us to live in. I love this advice that we get from Carrie Newhoff. And you don't have to be a parent to apply this. All of us. Here's the advice. Live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. We don't want to be so inundated with the tidal wave that we don't breathe. And by that, I mean we don't want to live in a way that we're just focusing on survival. We want to live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. Secondly, if you're a parent, is there a pressure that God would like to help you let go of? I just list out some of the ones we talked about today. The pressure that's caused by the belief that for God to be satisfied with your parenting, you've got to be perfect. Or the pressure that's caused by the belief that for you to be satisfied with you and your parenting, you've got to be perfect. Or maybe it's the pressure caused by comparison, or the pressure caused by competing parenting North Stars. I know that I parent more effectively and far more happily when I'm directed by a well-chosen parenting North Star rather than by unhealthy pressures and competing priorities. Maybe it's the pressure of that's caused by being overwhelmed by the urgent and missing out on the important. Or maybe God wants to help you let go of the pressure caused by the belief that, intentionality means that you're doing every important thing that you could do. For all of us, I would ask, is the Holy Spirit saying something to you? If so, man, lean in and listen. We are living in a time of much burnout. But God is with us. God is with us, and he will give strength to those who lean in on him. And so we want to be people who are listening and leaning into what the Holy Spirit has to say to us during this time.